Nearly £500 of funding for Scotland, nearly 70,000 new jobs, beefed up workers' rights, and new taxes on private schools and energy profits. That's the pitch to Scottish voters by Keir Starmer today in Labour's general election manifesto. So, will this be enough to deliver a general election win for Labour, or will Starmer crash and burn like his predecessors? I'm Paul Hutcheon, and I'm joined on Planet Holyrood today by Lorna Hughes and Ben Borland.
It's important we look at the facts.
Politics has to be about service.
A modern form of national service.
The outcome, that's for the voters to decide.
Right, I think that Planet Holyrood listeners are going to be asking themselves, what is in it for them? What's in this Labour manifesto that could benefit their lives? And I had a good look through the document. It seems like there's going to be 320 million extra for the Scottish Parliament. There's going to be another 150 million quid in levelling up funds spent by the new Scottish office. There's going to be a new deal for workers, which abolishes things like exploitative 0 hours contracts and getting rid of various pieces of Tory trade union legislation. We're going to have GB Energy, and there's going to be a sort of vague reset of relations. I don't know what you both think about it, but it seems like in terms of first steps, it's not bad.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when Starmer launched the manifesto today, it was interesting, it was the sleeves rolled up, looking as if he was about to get ready to take on and then obviously announce all of this. I think the 150 million coming to the Scotland office is going to be interesting and probably provoke a reaction from the current Scottish government, I imagine, if it hasn't come already.
I think they'll probably see it as the Anasarwar election fund, where they're doling out funding to Labour target seats. That's obviously what a cynic would say, and bears no resemblance to the reality, of course.
No, but you can understand why some people may say that. But there's a lot in that for people to get behind. There's a lot in that people, quite clearly will be crying out for. So, yeah, it looks like he means business.
Ben, I can imagine that the Daily Express are going to be right behind Labour on this.
Well, I mean, it's clearly a tax rising manifesto. Just on the levelling up funds, I think, Michael Gove, Boris Johnson, we've written a lot about this, that I know get Brexit done is the phrase that everyone remembers from 2019, but levelling up the country was arguably the biggest promise, and they've done that brilliantly well. I mean, councils across Scotland welcome this money. SNP council leaders, Labour council leaders, they all really welcome this direct spending from the UK government. Do
you think Scots feel that they've been levelled up? Folk in the north of England, do they feel that they've been levelled up?
Well, but it's a long job. It's a long process. It's only really just starting to get going. I think, that there's individual things, that there's I can't remember, it's the Empire.
You don't think, Ben, it's kind of Alistair Jack's Machiavellian approach of whereby he was putting money into safe Tory seat or to try and make some seats safer. I mean,
I don't think so. I think it looks fairly well distributed, and I think you can see that it's been a success because Labour want to kind of continue it and pump more money in. If it hadn't been,
it's not levelling down. I mean, all the indicators are going in the wrong direction. Folk can't get houses, poverty's up. I mean, what's been levelled up?
Well, it's more to do with transport links. These are infrastructure projects. They don't happen overnight, and it's a whole new way after 25 years of devolution of saying, look, the UK government needs to have some input here into things like town centres, regenerating cultural venues, and as I say, the free ports and the city, the investment zones are starting to pay off. Away from there, I mean, it's come as no surprise, but at least Labour are honest about their plans for the North Sea and the fact that they now see it as an industry in decline, and it'll just be gradually closed down under a Labour government. The SNP, I mean, John Swinney yesterday made it as clear as day that the SNP won't back new drilling, and yet today Kate Forbes is again trying to roll back on that and muddy the water. At least
there's very little between the parties on this. I mean, you look at the windfall tax that Labour are getting hammered over. I mean, the Tories support a windfall tax as well, and an extension of it in terms of the timescale.
I don't think. I
2 or
don't
3
think
percentage points.
I don't think there's as much between them. I think it's more the approach of no more new drilling, which inevitably will mean that the North Sea will start to scale down and close down over the coming years. If you are open to exploration and new fields, then it suggests that this industry can keep going. So it's while the individual policies aren't that different, it's that one big stance on do we carry on exploring and opening up fields, or do we just stop and go with what we've got and gradually close it down?
Now, I do accept that GB Energy, there's a bit of confusion about it, and there's a lot of grey, and certainly the expectations are high for this new company. Labour have said it could create 50,000 jobs in Scotland. I think Angela Rayner went a lot further than that. I'm not sure she meant to, but they have raised expectations on it, and they're going to have to deliver. Otherwise, a lot of folk are going to feel let down at the same time that we're losing oil and gas jobs in the North Sea. So I have to say we
don't yet know where it's going to be headquartered, do we? It's going to be somewhere in Scotland. And you're right about the confusion in the numbers. And what is the pivotal point is, yes, they've got to get that kind of thing right. Because if they don't, then, well, they've got problems, but the whole country's got problems, because this wealth has got to come, growth has got to come from somewhere.
I did notice last night on the Sky debate that one of the biggest claps that Starmer got was for his policy on imposing VAT on private school fees, which I think is hugely popular amongst most of the population, but is deeply unpopular amongst 5% of the population. I don't know what you think about this, Ben, but it seems like it's going to be implemented pretty quickly. The money is going to be distributed across the UK, and extra teachers are going to be hired as a result of it.
It seems like a kind of virtue signalling policy. It's Labour. I think under Keir Starmer, Labour looked a lot like New Labour. They're quite a centrist party, but this is his one way of saying, no, we're still up the workers, we're hammering the rich, we're charging VAT on private schools. I think it's a signal to the Labour left rather than a sort of sensible policy.
That raises a chunk of that cash, 1.5 billion. That's not to be sniffed at in the current climate.
But then there's a lot of, it's been rushed in, as you said. We've heard today that perhaps children with learning disabilities, they're not going to get exemptions. There's an awful lot of private schools have kids on bursaries or local authority funded kids, or kids with one particular outstanding skill, and the question is, are we now going to be seeing less of those coming through the schools? That there's private schools that are warning that their entire future's at stake. It just seems,
wouldn't they? I mean, it's you would expect that sort of scaremongering.
I mean,
let's wait and see what happens. It's 20%, a lot.
Yeah, it's going to raise a lot of money, and it's going to be hugely popular with voters, hugely. So, as Paul says, it may only be a few percent of the electorate who don't like it very much, but they're the ones that, if they want to send their child to private school, will be able to probably, take on that extra because that's what they'll do. They'll just charge everybody extra.
I think
mean,
as
what
well,
they'll do, the parents will just put it on their credit card.
Yeah.
They'll just borrow a bit more. The grandparents will help out. They're not
know-
going to be taking their kids out of these schools. It's just not going to happen.
I know, I know people whose kids go to private schools. But mine went to the local, go to the local state school. So I think, and particularly in Scotland, this probably happens across the UK. People make choices, so you might pay more for a house or a home in a good catchment area, and then you pay the premium for a state education that way. Other people say, look, I'm going to stay in this area, but I'm going to use the money I've saved to send the kids to private school. And I think it's just such a sweeping generalization to say that, it's only the rich that can all afford it.
No, I don't think it is just the rich. It's not the rich. But, you mentioned people who move house into a better catchment area. If they buy a house, they'll pay stamp duty on it. They don't get a tax break. But if you choose to purchase your kid's education, you get a 20% discount. That's what's coming to an end. I think it's recognizing that you have that right to make that choice as a consumer, but given that it's a high-end product, you're going to have to pay VAT on it. And that's why I think you got the standing ovation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you say, when you put it like that, 95% of the country back it. It's politically, it's a no-brainer. Just again, could it not wait a year? Does he need to bring it in? I mean, schools.
I think we need the money. I think that's the point. He needs to raise that money.
Well, yes.
That's something you said, Ben, at the beginning. You said it's a tax raising manifesto. I mean, is it, basically ruled out any rises in income tax, national insurance. I think corporation tax, don't hold me to that. The only taxes that they really want to raise are the VAT on private school fees, scrapping non-dom status, which I don't think anyone could really argue against, and the oil and gas, which I accept as controversial in the industry. I mean, those are sort of three pretty limited taxes, and the ones that ordinary working people are having to pay, they're not going up. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a tax-raising budget on the whole.
Well, I mean, I think obviously here in Scotland, income tax is kind of partially, if not wholly, devolved anyway. So Starmer would have to go some to catch up with our tax rates. I can imagine the backlash from my colleagues down south if that was the case. I think ultimately it's quite a safe manifesto away from the tax rises. There's not much else there. Like you said, there's three big headline tax increases. There's a few other things, but there's nothing hugely exciting in there.
No, I agree with that. You know what I think? No, I think you're right. It is cautious and it is safety first. And the line that Labour have used is that they want to under-promise and over-deliver, because you look at the Tories and they said in 2019 they want to cut tax, and yet tax is at the highest rate since 1948. They said in 2019 they wanted to cut immigration. Net migration is now it's rocketed. So you're dealing with an angry public that is frustrated at broken promises. So I think that Labour are trying to rein that in, and I think that explains the caution, as well as the fact there's not much money. It strikes me as quite shrewd politically what they're doing.
I mean, I think he's trying to bring stability. You can see that, as you say, he's not wanting to promise the earth, because we've all become very, very cynical over the last 15 years as, growth has gone down, as businesses have been lost, as we've all got far less money. So you can understand why he's doing that. But he does look like a confident future Prime Minister in the waiting. He's not all show. Some people think he's really boring. Maybe this is a bit of a boring manifesto, but it's been said before, perhaps we just need that kind of caution now, and let's see. Because he will be judged, and he'll be judged very quickly because of the state of the country. because of the cost of living crisis, because, you know, we have people being unable to pay their fuel bills and really, really feeling it. So he's not going to have an easy ride.
We've had politicians in the past, you know, Boris Johnson, his ilk, you know, they've got a bit of pizzazz, they've got a bit of charisma, you know, they break the rules, they get away with it. And I feel like at this moment in time, in this moment in history, voters are maybe hankering for competence and professionalism and maybe just politics to just dial down a notch a little bit and for things to be delivered properly. Now, they may go back to characters who've got that pizzazz and drive and charisma, but I think that in 2024, I think that it looks good for Starmer, because I think that they're probably looking for someone like him, just a sort of a decent public servant. And they don't really want the kind of the Boris Johnson type figures anymore.
No, I think it's interesting. I mean, there's an element, obviously, you see across the world who the populist politicians are still there. But I think in Britain, we definitely need some stability. And I think people are desperate for that. Now, you know, time will tell, but it will not be a long time, but it will tell whether or not he's able to make this work.
I'll say one thing for Starmer. There's that famous quote about Napoleon said he wanted lucky generals, not talented generals. Starmer seems so lucky. The past few years, everything's just sort of fallen in his lap since he. I mean, we talk about 2019 and Boris. I think he gets such a rough ride because no sooner was he in.
Come on, Ben.
He's barely been in office 3 months, and we had a once in a century global pandemic, which just it destroyed the public, destroyed the public purse. And it sort of triggered all these momentous events, and now people are going, "Oh, I want stability," but you can't. You know, Boris also had to deal with the war in Ukraine and the resulting surge in energy prices. In politics, there's that other famous saying about events.
Yeah,
the Tories have had some fairly momentous events to deal with, whereas it looks as though, and each one of those has driven up Labour's popularity. So Starmer's kind of in this position where he looks like he's going to have this whopping great majority without really ever standing for anything or putting himself.
Yeah, but you and I, Ben, you and I both know that he could, you know, if he doesn't get this right, he will be a one-term prime minister. You know, the way that down south actually votes. So, you know, he's got to be measured. He's a former prosecutor. He'll look at both sides and be careful. But I think what are our options? Because Rishi just keeps having, you know, a worse campaign than the day before.
I kind of disagree. I think certainly in British politics and down south as much as anywhere, voters tend to give people more than one term. You get the political sort of pendulum swings 10 to 15 years. We're seeing it at the moment very much so. I think we'll see it again in the Holyrood elections. But voters recognise that you can't get much done in one term. I think Starmer would really, really, really have to screw things up, especially.
Well, I mean, I take your point, Ben, about him being lucky. I mean, there's an element of that, but you shouldn't underestimate the self-inflicted wounds of the Tories as well. I mean, Partygate and also the Liz Truss budget, which, you know, has been so damaging for the Tory chances in terms of their handling of the economy. I mean, I think that when we all wake up on July the 5th, it's going to look very good for Labour. They're going to have a massive majority. But if there is a realignment of the right, as you've seen in some places in Europe and reform and the Conservative Party some accommodation, then almost immediately politics is competitive again down south. You probably have the centre-right parties, on 30% plus, and Labour probably losing lots of seats at the next general election, the one after the one we're getting. So things can change very quickly, and I do think that Starmer is going to be judged on delivery of the manifesto. He's going to be judged on making a difference to people's lives, the bread and butter issues like NHS waiting lists, economic growth, housing. If he doesn't get those things right, he's probably going to be out in his ear after 4 years.
I mean, a couple of things again, just to go back to the Scottish perspective, a couple of things to look out for. I think it's going to be so unusual to have, to borrow the SNP's favourite attack line, a government that Scotland voted for.
Yeah, well, exactly.
All we've been hearing since 2010, you get Scotland gets lumbered with governments it doesn't vote for. If Labour get the most seats up here, and if Starmer gets in, then that's gone. That dissolves in an instant.
I mean, I'm fascinated actually on that, Ben. Is it this week will we see the SNP manifesto, Paul?
Next week.
Properly, right? Just what they are going to have in that is going
There's going to be a lobby group. They're going to be saying if there's a Labour government, we will lobby them on X, Y, and Z. That's all they can do.
Because as Ben says, you remove the attack lines, you remove that after July the 4th, then I mean it's interesting times ahead.
Where do they go on independence? That's the thing. Line 1, page 1. We've come a long way.
I think it's more about. I think it's more about SNP holding on to power for 2026. Everything will be geared toward. They'll throw the kitchen sink, because once they lose power at Holyrood, they've lost their power base, and that's it. It's war for a generation.
Yeah. Like I say, this sort of 10, 15 years, the swing that there seems to be. I think the position on independence is going to be really interesting. I mean, God forbid. I think I speak for all Express readers. Possibly the best outcome would be a Conservative government. I think even the Conservatives are kind of giving up on that. I think the worst outcome, though, would be a hung Parliament with Labour requiring SNP support, because despite
not going to happen. No, they're going to get a thumping majority, aren't they? I mean, it's unless something cataclysmic happens, it's going to be.
Yeah, and you can see at the moment that they're again. It's that treading carefully. He's not going to do anything. Certainly, he has control over Starmer. For that to happen, Paul. So it could only be events, I suspect, as Ben says.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? International, obviously, there's conflicts, and would a ceasefire in Gaza swing things? Or?
The only thing I can think of is if Keir Starmer gets caught on camera on tape slagging off the England football captain or something like that. I mean,
something that he does.
Slagging off the D-Day veteran. I don't know. I mean,
I did think. I don't think this was brought up last night, but despite the fact that I'm English, I did think Starmer in particular could have wished England and Scotland well in the Euros. When he was asked in the very first TV debate who he'd be supporting, and both him and Rishi said, I'll be cheering on England. I think particularly for Starmer, he's looking to try and win 30 seats in Scotland. It wouldn't have done him any harm to say, well, I'm supporting both our home nation teams.
Yeah, but look, Flynn was asked that question, remember, on ITV, what team are you going to support? And he said Scotland straight off the back. And, I think he's honest. And I think that, had either of them said Scotland and England, or, made any merit of Scotland, then they would just have been ridiculed.
Yeah, true. Maybe hypocrisy kind of.
Right. Okay. I think we're going to. We're going to have to wrap things up. That brings to a close another Planet Holyrood. I hope you've enjoyed it. This episode is available on YouTube and can be downloaded on Spotify. So thanks again.
It's important we look at the facts. Politics has to be about service.
A modern form of national service.
The outcome, that's for the voters to decide.